The year was 1946. Europe was still reeling from the devastation of World War II. Cities lay in ruins. The world's great powers were rebuilding, and the skies, once filled with bombers, were finally quiet again. But in the stillness that followed the war, something new began to appear. They came without warning. Streaks of light, metallic objects, glowing projectiles cutting through the Nordic skies. They weren't planes, they weren't meteors, and they didn't belong to any army. The people of Sweden, Finland, and Norway began to call them spökrockets, ghost rockets. And what made them different from other UFO sightings was that many of them were seen crashing into lakes. But when the military went to recover them, they were gone. No wreckage, no debris, nothing. This is the story of the Ghost Rockets of Scandinavia, the UFOs that fell into the lakes and vanished. It all began in the summer of 1946, barely a year after the war ended. Northern Europe was still haunted by the echoes of conflict. People were nervous. The sky was still a place of uncertainty. Then, one night in May, a farmer in northern Sweden saw a bright silver object streaking across the horizon, long and slender, leaving a trail of smoke behind it. Moments later, he heard a hissing sound, like steam, followed by a dull explosion in the distance. He assumed it was a meteor. But the reports didn't stop there. In the following weeks, hundreds of sightings began flooding in, from civilians, soldiers, pilots, and meteorologists alike. Objects shaped like torpedoes, cigars, and rockets were seen moving across the sky, sometimes glowing, sometimes silent, often traveling horizontally, as if under control. Some were said to break apart mid-air. Others dove down, directly into lakes and rivers, causing splashes the size of small explosions. And then, nothing. No smoke, no wreckage, no ripple afterward. Swedish newspapers exploded with stories. At first, people thought the sightings were Russian test rockets, launched from captured German technology after the war. The Cold War was beginning to stir, and the idea of the Soviets experimenting with missiles over Scandinavia terrified everyone. But that theory began to crumble quickly. For one, no debris was ever recovered, not even fragments of metal or propellant. And the flight behavior didn't make sense for rockets. They didn't travel on predictable ballistic paths. They sometimes hovered, changed direction, and moved at speeds far beyond anything known in 1946. The Swedish Air Force took the report seriously. They scrambled fighter planes, deployed reconnaissance teams, and even sent divers into lakes where witnesses claimed to have seen the objects crash. They found nothing. No oil slicks, no craters, no impact marks, not even disturbed sediment beneath the water. Whatever these things were, if they were even solid objects at all, they left no trace. By August 1946, the situation had escalated into a full-blown military concern. Swedish radar installations began picking up objects, dozens at a time, moving in formation, too fast and too organized to be natural. The Swedish defense staff contacted British and American intelligence, asking if these could be tests from their side. The response was clear: no. In fact, U.S. intelligence was equally baffled and deeply concerned. At that time, America had recently begun investigating strange aerial phenomena on its own, what would later become the Project Blue Book era. The Ghost Rockets became one of the earliest post-war UFO mysteries to involve official international military cooperation. And yet, even with all their resources, they found nothing. One of the most famous incidents occurred on July 19, 1946. Witnesses in Lake Kormjärv, Sweden, reported a metallic, cigar-shaped object descending slowly, almost gliding, before it crashed into the water with a tremendous splash. The Swedish military sealed off the area within hours. Divers were sent down into the dark, icy water. Days turned into weeks. They searched every inch of the lake bed. Not a single piece of wreckage was found. One diver described it later as descending into a grave where even sound refused to follow. What made the ghost rockets so disturbing wasn't just that they were seen, but how consistent the reports were. These weren't fleeting lights or vague shapes. Witnesses described metallic bodies, windows, fins, and controlled flight paths. Some said they emitted no smoke or flame, suggesting propulsion unlike any known technology at the time. By the end of 1946, Sweden alone had documented over 2,000 sightings. Of those, about 200 were considered credible enough for military investigation. And still, there was no explanation. Some experts theorized they were meteors, but meteors don't maneuver, travel horizontally, or land softly. Others blamed mass hysteria, saying post-war Europe was jumpy, seeing ghosts in the sky where none existed. But radar operators, men trained to read the skies, had tracked them too. So had pilots. So had ground observers from multiple angles simultaneously. If it was all a hallucination, it was a very coordinated one. As autumn turned to winter, the sightings suddenly stopped. No one knew why. The skies went quiet again, as if whatever was moving through them had completed its mission, or decided to leave. In the years that followed, the ghost rockets were largely forgotten by the public, but not by the military. Sweden's official investigation continued secretly for years, with files quietly exchanged between Sweden, Britain, and the United States. Decades later, in declassified documents, it was revealed that some intelligence officers believed the ghost rockets were not from any earthly origin. One report concluded, these phenomena appear to be structured, controlled, and real. Their lack of debris suggests a technology far beyond current human capability. In the decades since, similar phenomena have been reported around the world, especially near large bodies of water. Objects that dive beneath the surface, moving seamlessly between air and sea. Today, we call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. But the ghost rockets were the first time such behavior was recorded, studied, and logged by military authorities. They were, in many ways, the first modern UFO wave. Even now, more than 70 years later, the lakes of Sweden and Finland are still whispered about by locals. Fishermen tell stories of strange vibrations deep below the surface, of sonar readings showing shapes that vanish as soon as they're scanned. Some divers refuse to enter certain lakes at all, not because of danger, but because of the feeling that they are being watched from below. So what were they? Were they secret Soviet rockets? Early test of captured V-2 technology? That's what officials wanted to believe. But if they were, the Russians never claimed them, and no evidence ever surfaced. Were they natural phenomena? Possibly. But how do you explain their intelligence, their control, their deliberate dives into lakes, and the absence of impact? Or were they something else entirely? A reconnaissance of our planet, a silent survey of the human world, by something that came here, observed us, and then slipped quietly back into the dark. Even now, as satellites orbit above the same Nordic skies, no one has ever explained what happened that summer. No crash sites, no fragments, no answers, just hundreds of witnesses, pilots, soldiers, scientists, who all saw the same thing, rockets that weren't rockets, objects that flew like machines, but died like ghosts. Tonight, if you stand beside one of those cold Scandinavian lakes, You might hear it too. A faint hissing in the distance, like steam rising from the water. You look up. The stars are still. The moon reflects perfectly on the surface of the lake. Then, for a moment, a light moves. Fast, silent, and deliberate. Cutting across the sky and descending toward the horizon. There's a splash. Then nothing. The water smooths over again. The reflection returns. The night resumes its silence. And somewhere, beneath that glassy surface, the ghost rockets still sleep, waiting. Please subscribe. See you soon.